Hello, this is Christina here with the Stage Nature Center, here to do a program on bats. We'll get started here in just a moment, gives people a chance to connect with us, and then we'll get started. Hello again, this is Christina here with the Stage Nature Center, here to do a program about bats. We'll get started here in just a moment. I'm going to give us just another moment to give people a chance to get connected with us. All right. Hello again, this is Christina here with the Stage Nature Center here in Troy, Michigan, and we're getting ready to get started to do another program here on our Facebook page. Today we're going to be talking all about bats. So we'll get started on that topic here in just a minute. I hope everybody is doing well. And if you live locally, maybe you've had a chance to come on out to the trails or even visit the building because we are open. The building is open. We reopened last Tuesday. So our hours are currently from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So you can come out on the trails right now, and you can also come visit the Nature Center. So I recommend that you guys come do that. We are, of course, practicing a few things to keep everybody safe, practicing social distancing, asking everyone who comes into the Nature Center to wear masks, and also to keep social distancing in mind when you go out on the trails as well. We're also keeping the building down to a minimum, or maximum, I should say, of 10 people at a time to help with the safety with not spreading anything. So those are some of the things you'll find if you come visit us right now. But if you don't want to come in the building, you can go out on the trails without coming through the building right now. So definitely feel free to do that. We did start doing in-person programs again, also limiting those to 10 people at a time. And so we're excited to get to start doing those again as well. You can go onto our Stage Nature Center website, stagenaturecenter.org, to learn about the programs that we have upcoming. Or you can go on and look on our Facebook page here and explore the programs that we have upcoming as well. So I definitely recommend that you do that. I hope to see you guys if you're local. Also, we are a nonprofit, as I've mentioned to you before, if you've joined us before, and the primary way that we fund what we do here is through our programming. Obviously, we've been closed for the past few months, so if you're able to make a donation today to help us continue to do what we do, to take care of the animals, to staff the building, help us to continue to do programs, definitely would be very appreciated. Thank you for everyone who has supported us, and thank you for everyone who comes out here to visit us, and all those different ways that you support us by coming out here and doing our programs, supporting us here online, joining our Facebook programs. So we really appreciate everyone's support and enthusiasm for the Stage Nature Center. So thank you all for your wonderful support. So like I said, today we're going to be talking about bats. So before I show you, I have some different photos and videos to show you. You may have already seen the first photo that I had up, and we'll go back to that photo here in just a minute. I'm going to show you a few other things to get us started on bats. I am trying to watch our comments on another device here. So that way, if you have a question, you can put your question in the comments. The connection is a little slow, so unfortunately the comments are not updating very fast. So if I miss your question or I miss your comment, I will definitely, after the live stream, go back and look through the comments to make sure I answered all of your questions. And if I didn't answer it while we're doing the live program, then I will answer it as a comment after the post is done. You can also watch this on our Stage Nature Center website and all the other live Facebook programs that I've done over the past few months. And we will be doing these through next week, through the end of June. So we have a couple more programs left. So again, today we're going to be talking about bats. This is a popular topic with some people. Some people are a little bit nervous about it. Some people love bats. There's a lot of different mixed feelings about bats out there. And that's understandable. It's one of those things that a lot of people aren't as familiar with. They come out at night, not when we are typically out. Although if you're a nighttime person like I am, then you might be a little bit more familiar with those nighttime animals. I tend to be a night owl myself. But for the most part, we are not as familiar with animals that are nocturnal, that come out at night and sleep during the day. And so a lot of those animals are poorly misunderstood. We don't see them very often, and especially for bats, when we do see them, they're flying around and sometimes they freak people out. There's a lot of myths out there associated with bats, which we'll talk about some of those today as well, and hopefully help you feel better about them. Now, one thing I will say, I know one of the things that obviously has people concerned right now is COVID. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about bats and COVID. There's actually still a lot going on out there research-wise, as you all I'm sure are aware, to learn more about it, learn more about where it came from. I know one of the theories is that it came from a bat that maybe somebody who bought in a market had as a meal. And you know what I will say about that is that there are a lot of diseases that can be transmitted from animal to human by us eating them. And of course, we take a risk when we eat animals. I am an omnivore myself, so I eat both plants and meat. I do eat meat. It's one of the reasons why it's important to cook your meat thoroughly. Also, know where you're getting your meat from. That is so important. A lot of people don't know where their food is coming from. They just assume that it's coming from somewhere place. So learning about where your food comes from, knowing that where it's coming from, these places practice good standards of health and also treatment to the animals and things like that are important. And that's kind of what I'll say about this is it's not the animal's fault. that there's lots of different diseases that animals can carry. And unfortunately, sometimes they do come over to humans depending on our different activities. And especially as humans come into more contact with animals nowadays, because of technology and expansion, we sometimes come into contact with more diseases that can be transmitted to us. And then vice versa. Humans can transmit diseases to animals as well. And actually, one of the things that's affecting bats here in the United States was something that humans brought over with them. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. But that's what I'll say about COVID. Now, I want us to understand what bats are. A lot of people have some misconceptions about bats. One of the things that people think is that bats are flying rodents, and they're not. I'm going to show you a bat right here. This is not alive. It is real. We have a lot of different mounts in taxidermy here at the Nature Center, and these mounts in taxidermy help us teach people about them. These were typically donated to us after an animal has been found dead. People will bring them to us, and that way we can share them with you. We don't hunt these animals to have them here, so I'll clarify that for those of you that are concerned. So this here is actually a little brown bat, and this is not too much smaller than a larger bat that we're going to have here in Michigan called the big brown bat. It's not even that much smaller than the largest bat in Michigan. Our bats here that we have in Michigan and throughout the United States are actually small bats. All of our bats here in the United States are what we call microbats, which typically means that they're small, but there's a couple other things that make them microbats as well. Microbats also have smaller eyes typically. They're not blind. That's another myth about bats, is that they're blind and that they can't see. But microbats typically have smaller eyes. They have larger ears because microbats are typically the ones that use echolocation. Now, there are some megabats, which are usually the larger bats, but not always, that also echolocate through a different way. And we don't have megabats here in the United States. And the other thing about megabats, which are the larger bats, they are fruit bats. So a lot of people, when they see these really big bats, they get them confused and they think they're vampire bats. But actually, the really big bats are the fruit bats. Now, our bats here in Michigan, like this one, are insect eaters. So these guys are very important to have around because they eat lots and lots of insects. And we'll talk a little bit more about that here in just a little bit. I also want us to understand how bats are related to different mammals. Bats are special because they are mammals. They're not birds. They have fur on their bodies. They give birth to live babies. But they are the only mammals that can fly. The only mammals that can fly. So I'm going to show you something else here. Here it is. Hopefully you can see it okay. Oh, there's a little bit of a reflection. Let me put a sheet of paper behind it so it's easier to see. Hopefully you can see, oh, there's a little bit of a reflection. So this here is a bat skeleton. And here you can see the fingers. This makes up the wing. So here's the arms, right there. And then here's the fingers. So bats' wings are their hands. They have the same 5 fingers that we do, except they use their fingers and their hands to fly. Bats belong to their own group of animals called Chiroptera, which means hand wing. Their wings are their hands. But you can see how long these fingers are. If we had fingers as long as a bat's, our fingers would drag on the ground when we walk. That's how long their fingers are. And that helps them fly because that gives them extra skin in between their fingers so they can fly. So bats are not rodents. They're not mice or rats. They belong in their own group of animals called Chiroptera, which again means hand wing. So they are very unique. Now, some people, I talk about them being the only mammals that can fly. There is another mammal that some people say fly, or they call it flying, and that is this animal right here. the flying squirrel. It is a mammal. It has fur on its body. They do give birth to live babies. They do feed their babies milk, but they don't actually fly. They don't have wings. They have this flap of skin in between their legs called the patagium. They stretch open their legs. They jump from a tree, and kind of like a kite, they glide. That skin catches the air and they glide. I call it falling with style because it kind of is a controlled fall. It's a graceful fall. They're not actually flapping and flying like a bat does. So they're called flying squirrels, but they don't actually fly. They glide. So bats, again, are the only true mammals that can actually fly. And bats, there's about 1,300 or so different species of bats found throughout the world. Here in Michigan, we have 9 species. Here in the United States, around 50 or so species, but they're always discovering new species. They're really fascinating animals. And so they're really neat to learn about, and they're so important to the environment, which we're going to talk here about in just a little bit. Before I switch over to the photos and videos, I want to double check and make sure there hasn't been any questions yet, because bats are a topic that a lot of people have questions for. Okay, I don't see anybody has any questions. Oh, somebody said they're not getting any sound on their phone. Yes, Buzz Lightyear for the Falling with Style. Let me know if you're having any trouble hearing me. I'll try to monitor the comments again here. But it looks like others are hearing me. Okay, I don't see any questions at this time, so I'm going to go ahead and move on to the presentation. Okay, so this is a photo that we're looking at here is of big brown bats. And these are one of the bats that we have here in Michigan. So, like I said, here in Michigan we have 9 species of bats. Something I'll tell you, and some of you already know this about me, but I used to work for an organization called the Organization for Bat Conservation. It had the bat zone at Cranbrook. They moved to Pontiac back in 2017, I think it was. And unfortunately, the Organization for Bat Conservation had to close down. But I used to work for them for a little while before they closed. And then I came here to the Stage Nature Center. It was about a year and a half after I came to the Stage Nature Center that unfortunately the Organization for Bat Conservation had to close down. If you know about our owls here at the Stage Nature Center, that's where the owls came from, was from that organization because they needed a new home. So some of the photos and pictures and videos that you're going to see here are actually from the bats that I worked with at the Organization for Bat Conservation, such as these 2 big brown bats right here. So I actually think when you see them close, they're pretty adorable, in my opinion. Not everybody thinks that, and to each their own. But when you see them up close, you realize that they're actually just not as scary as people think they are. And again, they're just not that big. Their wingspan for a lot of the species that we have here in Michigan are a foot or less. The largest species of bat we have here in Michigan, which you'll see a picture of in just a little bit, is called the hoary bat, and they have a wingspan of just over a foot, 13 to 16 inches. Otherwise, they're smaller than that. So our bats are not very big. Okay. One of the things that makes bats special, I already mentioned that they belong to their own group of animals called Chiroptera, which means hand wing. Another thing that makes them a little different from a lot of animals is echolocation. I mentioned a minute ago that the bats that we have here in the United States are called microbats. One of the things that makes a microbat special is that they echolocate, which means that they make a sound with their mouth that's at such a high frequency that we cannot hear it with our ears. And then that sound bounces off of things around them, bounces back to their ears, and helps create an image in their head of where things are at. Now, like I said, these bats can see. They're not blind. They can see. But most bats that echolocate, they have very small eyes, and a lot of them live in really dark places like caves, where even if you could see really well, if there's no light in the cave, then you're not going to be able to find your way around. So they use that echolocation to help them get around those darker spaces. So like I said, normally we can't hear this sound, but there are devices that allow us to hear echolocation. We call them bat detectors that will bring down the frequency low enough that we can hear it. And this video that I'm going to play is a video that is taken in slow motion of bats using echolocation to help them catch bugs. Remember, I mentioned that the bats that we have here in Michigan are all insect-eating bats. In fact, the majority of the bats in the United States are insect-eating bats. So I'm going to play this video here. I'm not going to talk too much during the video because I want you to be able to hear it. If you hear a high-pitched sound, that high-pitched sound is the bat making that echolocation for it to hone in on where that bug is, like moths. That echolocation is so good that they can detect one strand of your hair in front of them, so that they're not going to get stuck in your hair. Sometimes people say, oh, they're going to get stuck in my hair because they can't see. They're not going to get stuck in your hair. And again, that echolocation is really good. Something else I want you to notice when you're watching this video is the way the bat flips itself to help catch the bugs. So sometimes they use the tail and the tail membrane around it to catch the bugs and bring it up to their mouth. So they're really quite acrobatic. So I'm going to go ahead and play this video. So again, notice how the bat brings its tail up and the skin around the tail to help it catch the bug there. It's really fascinating. This is one of my favorite videos. I could watch it many, many times and still be amazed by what they can do. So that's showing you again, or letting you hear the echolocation that they make to help them hone in on their prey, on their food. And then you can also see here in the video how acrobatic they are. So this next video I have is a bat that I worked with at the Bat Zone. Now, I first and foremost want to say, you'll notice that I'm not wearing a glove in this video. We typically wear gloves at the Bat Zone when we're handling bats, and you never, ever, ever want to handle a bat, especially a wild bat, without wearing gloves. And that's because even though rabies is very rare, or it's not nearly as common as people think, in bats, if you get bit by a bat, that is how you're going to get the rabies transmitted to you. So it's very important that you wear gloves. Now, the bats at the Bat Zone, they were all vaccinated for rabies. We knew that they were safe and healthy, although we still typically most of the time wore gloves. This time I wasn't wearing gloves because I was trying to feed the big brown bat, and it's a little bit easier to give them the mealworm that you're going to see here in just a moment without the gloves on. But again, please do not ever pick up a bat or handle wild animals in general without wearing gloves. This is a different situation here. This was the bat that I was working with. Okay, so I want you to watch this video because this bat that I'm holding is actually echolocating. You can't hear it, but you'll see its mouth opening and closing. You do hear kind of a chattering sound, and that's just, it could be the teeth, but you're not actually hearing the echolocation. You could also see him twitching its ears as well, listening for things. So this bat, again, it was moving its mouth, it was echolocating. It looked a little wet because it had just eaten, and sometimes they get really messy, so we cleaned them off. We cleaned them off after they ate. So he had just eaten, and that's why he was wet, because we had cleaned him off. Now this next few videos that I'm going to show you is some video that I took last week, actually, out by our pond here at the Stage Nature Center. I was probably about 9:15ish when I started seeing the bats out by the pond, and I took some videos. Not the greatest video, it was on my cell phone, but just to show you a little bit about what they look like when they're flying through the air. So around ponds like this are a great place to see bats because the bats will eat the insects that come out of the pond, and they'll also get drinks of water. This first video here, I'm just showing you the area. Actually, over here to the right in just a moment, you'll see a bat house. There it is. We do have multiple bat houses up here on the property, and in a little bit I'll give you some recommendations on the best place for a bat house, but near a source of water like this is a great place to have a bat house because, like I said, the bats like to live near the water, or they especially like to feed over the water when the bugs are coming up off of it, and sometimes they will drink water. Now, when I was watching the bats this night, they were flying down, flying over the water really close, but unfortunately I could not get it on video because it was getting too dark. So here's the next video. This next video is showing you the first bat that I saw that night, or the first sighting of a bat. It's really fast, so make sure you're watching it closely. The noise you're hearing is a robin in the background. And there's, oh, actually that was not a bat, I'm sorry. That was a bird. You'll see a bat here in just a moment. Oh, there it is, way, way up high. And in just a little bit, you'll see a video that's closer here so you can see the way it's flying. There it is. So one of the things I want you to notice in the way it's flying is how it's flapping its wings. There are birds that people get confused with bats because of their size. They eat bugs, so sometimes they're seen in the same areas, like swallows. And they're pretty small birds as well. But bats, they don't typically glide like a bird does. You may have noticed in that video that that bat was continuously flapping. So that's one way you can tell the difference between a bat flying through the air and a bird. Now, sometimes it is difficult when it's really fast and it's getting darker outside, but the bats, they typically just keep flapping their wings. They don't flap, 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 glide. Here is another video as it was getting darker. So that first video you saw the bat was pretty high. As it got a little bit darker, the bat actually, they started swooping down closer to me. And this is one thing that freaks people out. They think the bats are coming at them and they're going to attack them, that they're swooping down towards them, they're going to get stuck in their hair. Remember I said bats in Michigan like to eat bugs. And what likes to fly around our heads? We are huge bug magnets, and bats like that. So they're not flying closer to you to attack you or to get stuck in your hair. They might be flying closer to you because you've got the bugs flying around you. And so if they are swooping towards you, that's what it is. They're not trying to suck your blood. They're not trying to attack you, not trying to get stuck in your hair. So as the night went on, the bats were flying a little bit closer to me. There's another one. And again, I love watching them because of how acrobatic they are. Okay, so those are some videos showing you the way that they fly. And one of the things that I'll be doing this summer are bat walks, in which I'll take people out to areas where you're likely to see bats, like around the pond, and we'll look for bats flying through the air, and we'll use a bat detector to help us hear the echolocation of the bats. And you'll get to see what that looks like here in just a few moments. But if you want to join us for that this summer, it's one of my favorite activities to do, and we're very likely to see bats around here. So remember I said they eat insects. At the Bat Zone, we fed them mostly mealworms. Out in the wild, they eat lots of different types of insects. They do eat mosquitoes, but they also eat moths. They eat beetles. So they're very important in controlling insect populations. This little bat that I'm holding in my hand can eat anywhere between 2,000 to 6,000 bugs in one night for dinner. This one bat that I'm holding in my hand, which is called a big brown bat. Bats eat their entire body weight in food in one night for dinner. So that'd be like you eating a whole stack of pizzas as tall and as big as you are for dinner. So they eat a lot. They have a very high metabolism, and that's why they eat so much. And this video here is just showing you kind of what they look like up close when they're munching. I think it's pretty adorable. So again, you can actually see in this video just how small those eyes are, but it's not blind. And again, I want to emphasize, I'm not wearing a glove in this video. This was a bat that I worked with at the Bat Zone. That these bats were vaccinated. We were vaccinated, but I would never handle a wild bat without gloves on, ever. So please keep that in mind. So bats are very important because of the amount of insects they eat. We need them around to help control these insect populations. Like I said, this bat here can eat anywhere between 2,000 to 6,000 bugs in one night for dinner. So they are so important to us in eating all of these different kinds of bugs. So I'm going to just show you some pictures here really quickly of the different species of bats that we have here in Michigan. The most common bat that we have here is probably what you would consider, what we would consider the most common bat is the big brown bat. And they are found throughout Michigan. They're especially the most common bat in the lower peninsula of Michigan. So again, they're called the big brown bat, but they're actually not that big. They're just a little bit smaller than the largest bat in Michigan. So again, our bats here in Michigan they're not that big. This next bat is called the little brown bat, which looks very similar to the big brown bat. It's a little bit smaller. And they are found throughout Michigan, but they're the most common bat, for the most part, in the upper peninsula of Michigan. Although I will say that because of white nose syndrome, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit, their numbers have gone down quite a bit because of that fungus. But again, typically the more common bat in the upper peninsula of Michigan. So both the big brown bat and the little brown bat, and the next few bats that I'm going to show you, these are all considered crevice roosting bats. So 6 out of the 9 species of bats that we have here in Michigan are called crevice roosting bats. So they'll roost in a variety of places like crevices and cavities in dead trees and under the peeling bark of a tree. So that's why it's so important to leave trees up that maybe don't look so pretty, maybe they're dying. If it's not going to fall over on your house, it's a good idea to leave them up because animals like bats depend on these dead or dying trees for their homes. They'll also roost, females will form maternity colonies in areas like barns and sheds, houses. Some of you may be familiar with that as well. This is another crevice roosting bat that we have here in Michigan called the evening bat. A lot of our bats look very similar to each other. They're brownish, dark brownish color, so it can be hard to distinguish them, especially if they're just flying around. It can be really hard to distinguish what type of bat it is. This bat is a more rare bat in Michigan, and it's found throughout the southernmost region of the Lower Peninsula. This bat is called the tricolor bat, and the reason it's called that is because the base of its fur is dark, the middle layer is a light yellow, and the tip is dark. So that's why it's called the tricolored bat. It is actually the smallest bat in the United States. It's a pretty rare species in Michigan, but they do hibernate in the western upper peninsula, and they also occur in areas along the eastern shore of Lake Michigan. This bat used to be known as the eastern pipistrelle. So if you're more familiar with that name, that's probably why. Sometimes animals have their names changed as scientists discover more about them. Here's another bat that's not as common. It's less common, especially in southern Michigan, more common in the north. This is called the northern long-eared bat. Again, looks pretty similar to the other bats that you'd see. They have a little bit bigger ears. This is a species of bat that has been listed as threatened here in Michigan and by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And part of that is because of white nose syndrome, which again we'll talk about in just a little bit, but it's one of the species that's most impacted by that white nose syndrome. They will also hibernate in caves. The Indiana bat. This is an endangered species of bat that we have here in Michigan. They're very rare to see, so you're not likely to see an Indiana bat, unfortunately. They're found in the southernmost part of the Lower Peninsula, and they do hibernate for the winter time. This bat was actually listed as endangered in 1967 due to people disturbing their hibernating areas in caves. And when people disturb their hibernation, that's actually very bad for the bats, because when bats go into hibernation, they slow their body way down. Their heart is barely beating, they're barely breathing, and they do this so they don't have to eat for several months. There's no insects around for these hibernating bats to eat. So they slow their bodies way down. Well, when you disturb them when they're hibernating, they use all of this energy to wake back up, and then there's no food to replace that energy. So they end up starving to death. And this is one of the reasons why white nose syndrome is so bad, is because it wakes them up during hibernation. And again, we'll talk about that more in just a little bit. Now, there are 3 species of bats that we call tree bats. And these bats are usually found in trees because they roost typically in the foliage of living trees. These bats are more heavily furred than the other bats, and they have a furred tail membrane. These bats are also usually solitary, so the other bats that we talked about, especially the females with the maternity colonies, they roost in large groups, whereas these bats will typically roost by themselves even when they're having babies. So this bat is called the eastern red bat. It's common throughout Michigan, and it is known as a tree bat. They camouflage as a dead leaf by hanging from 1 foot above the ground, by hanging from 1 foot, and it hangs above the ground, and it covers its head with its tail, with that furred tail. So it looks like a dead leaf dangling from the tree. So you could be walking right underneath this bat and have no idea that it's dangling there. Another thing that happens is when they have their babies, which we'll see here in this photo, these bats are known to have 3 up to 4 pups per litter. Bats typically breed once a year, and most species of bats have 1 baby at a time. So again, they're not rodents. They don't have tons of babies, and they carry their babies with them while they grow, as you can see here in this picture. But this red bat has 3 babies, again, which is a lot more than most bats. Sometimes they are so heavy with these babies as they grow that they'll end up on the ground. And that's something to keep in mind, because they do blend in really well with the leaves, that if you're raking up leaves, you might accidentally rake up a bat, especially a bat and their babies. Also, it's important to keep in mind if you're mowing the lawn, these bats are not very big bats and they blend in very well. So this is one animal that helps support the idea of leaving leaves around, because they do camouflage with them. So this type of bat, unlike the crevice-dwelling bats, these are considered migratory. So they fly south for the winter time. They don't stay here in Michigan to hibernate. And that's true of the next bat, the hoary bat, which is another tree bat. And this is the largest bat in Michigan, like I said, with the wingspan of 13 to 16 inches. They are found throughout Michigan, but they're most common in the southern to central regions of the Lower Peninsula. Again, this bat, like the red bat, is migratory, so they fly south. They are heavily furred. They are a tree bat. And this bat will also have twins or up to 4 pups per litter. And then the last bat here is the silver-haired bat, which is another what we would call tree bat, also very heavily furred, and will travel south for the winter time. Now let's talk a little bit about white nose syndrome. And before I continue on, I think my device that I was watching the comments is not updating. So I'm going to just double check, make sure we are all still connected here and check the comments. That way I can make sure everybody is still with me. Okay, hopefully everybody is still with me. I haven't seen any comments or questions in a while, but I'll keep going, and hopefully everybody is still connected with me. So white nose syndrome is something that showed up here in the United States in the winter of 2006 to 2007, and it was first discovered in New York, in New York caves during that winter. Since the winter of 2006, white nose syndrome has killed easily more than 6 million bats in eastern North America, and it has spread to over half of the United States. So it's a pretty bad thing for bats, and unfortunately, they're having a really rough time with it. This fungus came from European bats. Now this fungus is native to European caves, where the bats there have lived many, many years with this fungus. And then this fungus, they believe, was transferred to the United States on people's clothing. When it's not growing, it's you can't see it. It's microscopic. And then these people went into the caves, and then the fungus spread to the caves, and then it grows on the bats. And it grows really well on the bats while they're hibernating. It needs a certain temperature. That's why some bats are more susceptible to it than others, because different species of bats will hibernate at different areas in the caves and at different temperatures. And this fungus, it's kind of like a nuisance to the bat. But the thing is that it bothers them so much that they wake up from hibernation. Like I mentioned earlier, when they wake up, they use up all those fat reserves, and then they go out during the wintertime to try to find more food, and they don't find any. And so they end up starving to death. The fungus will damage the connective tissues and the muscles and the skin of the bat as well. And unfortunately, about 90% of the bats that get this will perish, will die because of starvation. So the bats in the United States are very heavily affected by this. They're doing a lot of research to try to figure out what we can do to slow it down, and there have been some promising leads in that. And there's a lot you can learn. There is a website, whitenosesyndrome.org, that has lots of great information on it. But something we can do is, when we're going in and out of caves, for example, is be really careful about our clothing. They've closed some caves down so people can't transfer the fungus from one place to another. They also have areas where you have to disinfect, like your shoes, before you go into another cave. But this fungus came from another country, and our bats here just are not, their bodies are not used to it. They haven't spent many years living with it and dealing with it. So that it has been hitting our populations very hard. Okay, I'm going to see maybe some comments coming up here, so I am going to just double check here before I keep going. Oh, somebody is here in Kentucky. Hello. Okay. So something you can do to help bats, and it's a pretty easy thing to do, is put up bat houses. The bats that use bat houses are usually the crevice-dwelling bats, and these bats like to form maternity colonies. Remember, I said most of them have one baby at a time, and that baby stays with them. But these types of bats, these crevice-dwelling bats, like big brown bats, will form these big maternity colonies all together, and it helps to keep heat in the colony, and they'll all squeeze into these tight spaces. So if you have a big group of bats somewhere around your house, that's typically a maternity colony. Putting up a bat house gives them another place to go other than your house, and it still makes sure that they are around to eat the bugs. It's better than using insecticides and pesticides to get rid of the bugs because that has a big impact on the environment. So if you're trying to control the bugs in your area, put up a bat house. If you want to help bats in general, put up a bat house. If you have bats in your house, there's something that you do called an exclusion, which is a humane method of removing bats. You find a company to do this. You put up these one-way doors over the openings where the bats are going in and out of the house, so the bats leave and then they can't get back in. You want to have some bat houses already put up when you do this, though, so that way they have a new home to automatically move into. You also don't want to do this during the summertime when they're raising their pups. You don't want to do an exclusion at that time because you risk separating the moms from their babies, and you don't want to do that. So putting up a bat house is a great thing you can do. This is a triple chamber bat house that you can see here, which is a common size to get, and it can fit 300 bats in it. Believe it or not. Remember, our bats are not very big. Here is what it looks like from the bottom. So bat houses, unlike bird houses, don't have holes, big holes on the front. They will have a small slot for ventilation, but they won't have big holes because they don't want predators getting in and out. And bats don't enter in through the front, they enter in through the bottom. They fly up to that landing platform on the bottom, and then they climb up into those spaces. So this is kind of what it looks like from the bottom. This is the bat house that we have up by the pond. You want your bat houses to be 15 to 20 feet off the ground. They need to be up high enough that those bats can swoop in and fly up into the bat house. You also don't want it in an area with lots of trees where it's getting a lot of shade. They like to have a lot of sunlight, and that's because they want it to be nice and warm. So the best way to face it is facing south to southeast to get the most sunlight, and you want them to get at least 6 to 8 hours of direct sunlight a day. If they're not getting enough, one thing you can do is paint the outside of the house black to help them hold heat. You can also put bat houses on either side of the pole, and that helps give them temperature variation. If one side is getting too hot because of direct sunlight, then they can move over to the bat house on the other side of the pole. So it's a common misbelief that you should put a bat house in a tree with shade and with lots of branches. They actually like it out in the open, and they like all of that space. You can put it on the side of your house, above your garage, for example. You can put it up on a chimney, but it needs to have at least 6 feet of clearance below it for those bats to be able to get in and out freely. And if you're lucky with getting bats in your bat house, this is what they look like, all squished in there together. Like I said, these are the maternity colonies. These are the moms taking care of their babies. So these bat houses are so important to these maternity colonies, especially when we're cutting down a lot of their homes because they're usually dead or dying trees. And again, they help you by eating lots of bugs. So we can help them, and they can help you by eating a lot of bugs. Some places you can get bat houses. You can make a bat house. If you go onto Bat Conservation International's website, they have plans on how to make different size bat houses. You can buy them from different places. Audubon sells bat houses. Wild Birds Unlimited is a local store, also found throughout the country that you can buy bat houses at. You want to make sure that you're buying the right kind. Single cell bat houses are typically the very smallest you want to go, although BCI, Bat Conservation International, doesn't even recommend buying single cell bat houses anymore. They really need to be bigger than that. So you definitely want to look into it a little bit. And BCI, Bat Conservation International, is a great resource to learn about where you should put it, where it should be facing, depending on where you are in the country, how to build it. It's a great resource to find information about that. So one thing that we're doing here at the Nature Center, we've participated this in for a couple summers now. We will be participating again this summer as long as the project still goes, is a Michigan Bat Monitoring Program. And this is a group, this has actually been run by the DNR currently, and now in partnership with Belle Isle, with the Detroit Zoo. And they have sites, partner sites, like us here at the Stage Nature Center, that they send the equipment out to throughout the summer, and we do driving surveys of bats. So what we do, so what you see here in this picture is an iPad. What you see up on the screen is actually the app that we use. It's by the company Wildlife Acoustics. And the bat detector gets connected to the iPad, and then the iPad records the echolocation of the bats and that is picking up. This data gets sent to the DNR and those who are analyzing the bat echolocation calls, so that way they can then determine what the populations are looking like in different areas. So we've participated in this survey a couple summers now, and it's a newer project that's been going on, but it's such a great initiative. Also, this is what we use when I do the bat walks here, is we use the iPad with the bat detector connected to it. This on top of the car is the bat detector. It was not a very big piece of equipment, and here it's connected to the iPad with a cord, but you can plug it in directly to your iPad. You can purchase these on your own. There's a very basic version Wildlife Acoustics offers now, and it's I want to say between $150 and $200, I think. And then there's a more professional version, which is about $300 the last time I checked. I'm not 100% sure on that, though. So you can connect it directly to your device. And what I'm going to play here for you now is what it looks like on the screen and what you're hearing when it's picking up the bat echolocation calls. So what you're hearing is the echolocation of the bat. Remember, again, normally you can't hear that, but this device allows you to hear it, and this device also allows you to see their calls on the screen, which is really neat. So I love to do this when we go out for bat walks, so people can hear the bats echolocating and they can see their calls on the screen. And these different frequencies are part of what they use, different patterns, to help them identify the species that is being detected. So that gives you kind of an overview of bats and some things that you can do to help bats. I am going to transfer back now to the camera. Okay, and I'm going to double check the comments here, make sure. Let's see. Oh, if you don't already have a bat colony, will putting up a bat house bring in bats? So you can still get bats even if there's not already a colony around. Here is the thing. If bats have a roost, they're not going to leave that roost unless something has threatened that home, like the tree has been cut down or something else has caused them to have problems. They're going to stay in their roost. That'd be like us staying in our homes unless we really want to leave. So you still can get bats in your bat house, even if you don't have a colony that's living right around. It might take a few years, and so that's why when you put up a bat house, you don't want to give up hope if you don't get bats right away, because it might be a couple years before you get bats in a bat house. Some people have heard that you can attract bats by smearing their poop in the bat house, and that's not true. So there really isn't anything to attract them. It's all about location and how high you put it and where you put it, which is why I highly recommend you go onto Bat Conservation International's website to learn all about the recommendations for putting up a bat house. So, again, a bat house is a great thing you can do to help them. Other things you can do to help bats is you can not use insecticides or pesticides because the bats eat these insects. Planting a native garden is very helpful to them because it attracts the bugs that they like to eat, like the native species of moths. And then honestly, just sharing with others what you've learned about bats, so that way people have a better understanding of them and aren't quite so scared of them and appreciate them more. So that's one of the best things you can do to help bats, because they have such a bad rap and so many myths about them, and they need our help to clear up those myths. So that's something else you can do to help bats. And also make sure you're following those regulations by the Department of Natural Resources. Like if it says not to go into a cave, don't go into a cave. Respect those limitations. So I'm doing one more check here of the comments to see if I've missed anything. And I don't I don't see any other questions. Again, I'll go through at the end here once I disconnect and make sure there weren't any questions that I missed. I hope you all enjoyed learning a little bit about bats and getting to see some of these photos and videos. I will be doing another Facebook Live program this coming Friday at 1 p.m. on our Facebook page, and my plan is to talk about hummingbirds. So, and what you can do to attract them to your yard. So I hope to see you this coming Friday at 1 p.m. or I'll see you out here on the trails or at the Nature Center. Again, I hope everybody is staying healthy and safe, and I hope to get to see you guys soon if you live close. So thank you for joining us. And oh, I see somebody says they love mosquitoes, right? They do eat mosquitoes. Mosquitoes aren't necessarily their main source of food, but they do like to eat mosquitoes. It's just not one of their main sources of food, but they do help to control mosquito populations. All right. Again, I hope to see you in a few days on Friday at 1 p.m. Everybody take care and stay healthy. Bye.